The computer technology has been moving in a way that nothing else people have ever known.
It seemed we could build it, and I went in and told Frank, in words which I guess have become somewhat immortalized, that sure we could build it, but I had no idea why anybody would want such a thing.
Basically, I knew nothing. I would also say that most of us on the team didn't know anything about packet switching because, in fact, we were inventing packet switching.
We knew as a fact what the world was going to look like 10 years because we had already built it and we saw that it worked.
This future ubiquitous network for voice, video, and data communications of all kinds will connect homes, schools, and workplaces. It will constitute an essential ingredient for our future economic competitiveness and will open new worlds of information and services for all of the nation's citizens.
The web is incredibly exciting because it is the fulfillment of a lot of our dreams that the computer would ultimately not be primarily a device for computation, but metamorphosize into a device for communication.
This was the best idea I've seen in my entire life.
Came back with a checkbook and he wrote us a check for $100,000.
This is what the internet's all about. The internet's about connecting individuals or connecting individuals to information.
Who do you trust more? Do you trust some corporate executive in some smoky-filled back room, or do you trust your peers and the people who are connected to you?
We share some values with pretty much everyone in America and maybe everyone in the world. The deal is that, well, once you make enough money to live comfortably and to provide for your future, what's the point in having more?
We're in an era when people are starting to realize that communities, self-supervising communities, can produce work of very high quality, whether that's open source software or something like Wikipedia.
The image I used yesterday in my keynote is it's kind of like a baby. You know, at first it has all these senses and it doesn't know what to do with them, you know, and so you see the baby putting things in its mouth because it doesn't know how big they are, how, and eventually you get hand-eye coordination. We're starting to get hand-eye coordination on the web. So if you look at that app and you think, my gosh, there are 5 separate sensors involved in that operation. And 3 of those sensors are tied to cloud databases. You know, and again, going back to this idea of Web 2.0, one of them is that we're building an internet operating system in which the subsystems are not, for example, software to control, say, your screen or your keyboard or whatever. You think all those things that were in a PC-based operating system. They're subsystems to give you access to databases in the cloud, and many of those databases are actually user-generated databases. So in the case of say, the GPS data, it was probably manually constructed. You know, here are the the coordinates, and let's map the coordinates to some other. But if you look at the speech database, that's totally crowdsourced. Yeah. Google has basically, they started with the Google 411 app. They got a lot of voices. They started figuring out how to do speech recognition. Their search engine was already crowdsourced. So you're building these huge data assets in the cloud. And now people are starting to control those. and figure out how to use them and now coordinate them. And so everything, and you're starting to see image recognition is really coming in to its own big time. There's starting to be a number of consumer apps. iPhoto now does, face recognition. You've got to remember, Web 2.0 was about the second coming of the web, not about a new version. Everything in Web 2.0 was implicit in what Tim Berners-Lee originally designed. So it's not a new version. It was figuring out what worked about the web and what didn't. When people have always asked me what is Web 3.0, and I do think that if there is such a thing, first of all, it won't go by that name. And second, it will probably be, unless, of course, we have another crash that's so big that we kind of say, okay, here's the third coming, right? But I do think there are some things that make a qualitative difference. And the thing that is most significant to me is that the next generation of applications are not driven by people typing on keyboards and things that we create in text. Because everything, again, if you understand the heart of what happened with Web 2.0, I've called it harnessing collective intelligence. So when Google interprets a link, or when Wikipedia figures out how to get a bunch of people building an encyclopedia together, it's still all text. And again, we start to see things that are images, say, a site like Flickr, aggregation, social networking, video, YouTube. They're starting to get into new media, but it's still human-generated content. But increasingly, content is being generated by our devices, and I don't know that there's a single new thing, and if there is, well, I don't know that we'll notice it right away. I don't think people knew when Google came on the scene in 1998 that they were going to be as big as they were. If there's anything that's in that category today, I would say it's Twitter. And the reason, and it's kind of hard to say that when you look at how Facebook has a couple 100 million, and Twitter's a tiny fraction of their size. But the things that impress me the most about Twitter are one, it's brought real time to a new peak on the web. If you look at search on Twitter, you search for something, and then you say, a few moments later it says there are 29 new results, please refresh. That's that's a big difference, and it says something about where all this is going. And again, using this analogy of the way our own senses work. We've been working in a world in which all this was, with a delay. And originally it was a couple of days, and when blogging came out, it was like, hey, remember Dave Sifry at Technorati saying, we've got the real-time web, meaning blogging, so you have to update every day. Well, Google caught up with that. Now they have to catch up with Twitter, because they're not as real-time as Twitter is. But they will be. And what that means is this is becoming more sensory-like. And what more sensory-like means is you start to build systems for stimulus and response. And there is a whole part in of what we're building here is this new hybrid human-computer machine. And this is really the subtext in some ways of Web 2.0.